This past summer, my girlfriend and I were joining my family in Cape Cod for a week-long vacation. If you've ever been to Cape Cod, you might know how thickly wooded and thickly settled it is. There are either trees or houses lining every portion of the roads. And the roads, they re-narrow enough to make you want to drive a carriage rather than a car. Altogether, this gave you the feeling that you were very isolated from the nearby town. By the time we noticed that we arrived at the Airbnb, we almost drove past it. It's a simple, older, full family home. The front of the house was somewhat plain, with a small front yard and a gravel driveway. Although the Airbnb was on the expensive side, we split the cost in the house with 6 siblings, making it affordable for everyone. When my girlfriend and I arrived at the house, we immediately explored it. The original structure of the house was from the early 1800s, but had a modern extension to it. In the modern extension, there were 2 floors, with a living room, bedroom, and kitchen on the first floor, and 3 bedrooms and a bathroom on the second floor. Through a sliding glass door in the kitchen was a sunroom with huge, beautiful, slanted windows facing the backyard, and a dining table that was perfect for eating breakfast and playing games. On the other side of the sunroom was another sliding glass door that led into the 1800s portion of the house. This portion was 1 floor with a bathroom, 2 bedrooms, and a small living area. The best part of the house was the backyard. We specifically chose this house so that our dog could run around the backyard without anyone needing to watch him constantly. There was a short fence that encompassed the backyard, with a gate facing our driveway and a second gate facing the neighbor's long driveway, as their house was set far back from ours. There was also a huge tree, which must have been decades old, providing nice shade. A nice-sized patio stretched out from the back kitchen door and in front of the sunroom, with a small sitting area. Finally, there was a fire pit with some stumps to be used as seats. Overall, this house was a great place for the whole family to spend time at, gathering from their respective rentals for the week to spend time together. Being the first to arrive at the house, my girlfriend and I selected the nicest room for my parents and the second nicest room for ourselves. My brothers and their girlfriends stayed in the other 2 rooms on the second floor of the modern portion of the house, and my aunt and uncle and their 2 children took the 2 bedrooms on the first floor in the older portion of the house. We noticed that it felt a bit stuffy, so we went through the house and opened all the windows to let it air out. Being on the Cape, we left the windows cracked during the evenings and overnight to feel the cool Cape breeze while we slept. On the first evening around 9 p.m., my brother and his girlfriend were relaxing in their room. My brother suddenly heard whispers coming from outside the window, but his girlfriend didn't hear anything. These whispers persisted for the next several nights, always around the same time. Each time my brother heard it, but his girlfriend hadn't. One morning, he shared what he heard with the family, but none of us had heard anything. On our second to last night at the Cape, the entire family gathered at the house for a campfire and s'mores. We started telling family stories while my brother and his girlfriend took their regular evening walk. Suddenly, my brother's girlfriend came running to the backyard and told me that my brother needed me. I immediately followed her, afraid that something was wrong. I followed her through the house to the main road and back to where they had stopped in their walk. Just up the road, past the neighbor's driveway, I found my brother eagerly waiting for me. He said, "I finally found the guy who has been whispering. He's just up the road." You can see him shuffling back and forth down the road. I peered down the road, but could barely make him out with the lack of streetlights and the pitch dark of night. As the time went by, I could clearly see the unknown being when he stepped under a street lamp, but then he would fade back to the darkness as he continued shuffling. I could hear very faint but constant whispering coming from his direction. At this point, my brother wanted to confront him, but I talked him down because we didn't know who this unknown being was or what he might do if confronted. As I said that, the unknown being shuffled out from under the last street lamp on a dead-end road and back into the darkness. The only thing at the end of the road was a small forest, so he would need to come back towards us at some point. I looked at my brother and said, "He's going to come back this way." No sooner did I finish my sentence than he reappeared, still slowly shuffling back and forth towards us. I told my brother, "We need to get back to the house now." The three of us briskly walked back to the house, where we could still see the family gathered around the campfire. Still alarmed, we walked quickly through the house and directly to the side of the fence that ran past the neighbor's driveway to look at the person who would come shuffling by soon. Unbeknownst to us, the family had now started sharing ghost stories around the fire, and our sudden disappearance, reappearance, and alarmed state truly terrified them. At this point, the only lighting we had came from the fire about 30 feet from the neighbor's driveway. The pitch black and proximity of my entire family to this man I can only describe as the night whisperer set me on edge. My brother and I were still standing near the fence, staring in the direction where the night whisperer should appear and allowing our eyes to adjust to the darkness to see him better. My girlfriend got worried when she saw me staring off into the darkness and came to ask if I was okay, but my focus remained on the direction that the night whisperer might be coming from. Suddenly, I could see the night whisperer's silhouette shuffling back and forth down the neighbor's long driveway, not 10 feet from us. My brother and I quickly turned on the flashlights on our phones and pointed it in the night whisperer's direction. Seeing that our lights went on, my family suddenly became quiet and stood up, ready to find out what was wrong. Our phone flashlights fully illuminated the night whisperer's silhouette and the path. He appeared to be wearing a large, dark hoodie and dark pants, but the hood was pulled up so that we couldn't see his face. The combination of the bright flashlights and the once talkative but now silent family would surely startle any normal person on a nightly walk. However, the night whisperer just continued to whisper and shuffle back and forth, seemingly not noticing our silence or bright lights. One of us called out, "Hello?" But I was too focused on the night whisperer to remember who called out. Dead silence, save for the sounds of mumbling and whispering from the night whisperer as he continued to shuffle down the path, unfazed by our presence and actions. The rest of the family quickly put out the campfire and hurried inside the house while my brother and I followed his path with our flashlights. Little was said as we said our goodbyes, though we all knew that we experienced something not quite right. For the rest of our stay, we made sure that all of the doors and windows were closed and locked before going to sleep. So this incident occurred in 1984 when me and a friend of mine were on a 10-day backpack, hiking the Ray Lakes Loop in Kings Canyon, Natal Park. It was the last night of the trip, and the following day we had about an 8-mile hike back to my Jeep at Grants Grove Trailhead. We were camping close to Bub's Creek Trail Camp, but if you were daring enough, you could cross the creek over a large tree that had fallen across the way. It was fairly safe, only about 20 feet across, and only about a 6-foot drop into the water. But it ran fast and deep, and there were rocks, so you really didn't want to fall in, and you made sure to unbuckle your backpack to throw it off, just in case you happened to take a spill. We knew there was good camping on the other side of the creek because we had done previous backpacks on this trail before. We also knew a few people crossed to that side of the creek to camp. So we crossed the creek and set up our tent in a cool spot we had camped at before. It was located right on the edge of the forest with a huge meadow in front of us. We went separate ways looking for firewood. Wood was plentiful, and in a few minutes I had returned, and I was just about to go get another armful when my friend burst through the bushes into the camp. He had no wood, his face was drained white, and he was wide-eyed. "What the hell is going on?" I asked him. "A deer charged me," he said, and I could see he was really scared. "What? Come on, deer, don't attack people," I told him. I'm not lying. He insisted a huge buck charged me. I threw my wood down and ran back to camp. Well, I thought he was bullshitting me, but eventually we got a fire going and cooked dinner. We were sitting around the fire, and it was just before dusk when lo and behold, this huge 10-point buck came loping out into the meadow, followed by his doe. "That's him," my buddy exclaimed, and we both jumped up looking at this huge buck. He was staring us down and started walking closer to our camp. He didn't seem to be afraid of our fire, and he close to within about 60 feet. I was dumbstruck. I have been hiking, camping, and backpacking since I was 12 years old with my older brother, and I had never encountered anything like this. I picked up a large piece of firewood and smacked it upon the hollow log I had been sitting on, thinking it would scare him away. This may have not been the best move on my part, because the buck started pawing the ground and then began sauntering toward us. In the moment, me and my buddy were just frozen in fear, thinking, oh shit, what do we do now? We only carried bear spray with us, and it was not handy at that time. I would say the buck was within about 30 feet when he broke into a full charge, and then immediately he turned and galloped into the forest with his doe chasing after him. We just looked at each other, scared out of our wits, like, what just happened? But then a sound came floating across the meadow. I described it as someone dragging a metal bucket across a corrugated metal roof. The dragging sound traveled across the meadow and seemed to rise in volume and pitch. The dragging stopped, and then a voice cut through the night like a freight train whistle. Who? Huh, huh, huh. We were sitting in the tent with the fly open, and the sound of the voice seemed to surround us. It was everywhere. Then the dragging began again, moving closer to our camp. My friend and I looked at each other and, without speaking, grabbed the tent stakes and pulled the tent close. We crawled into the tent and huddled close together as the dragging continued outside the tent. We figured it was coming into the tent, and we were ready. There was a loud ripping sound as something clawed at the tent fly. We screamed and made tons of noise. Whatever it was outside, the tent took off running into the forest. My friend and I sat in the tent, not saying a word to each other. Minutes ticked by, and we started to calm down. We waited until daylight before opening the tent. Outside the tent, we found the culprit. It was a black bear. It had clawed at the tent fly and torn the mesh screen, letting itself inside the tent. The bear had urinated in the tent. My friend and I no beat out of there. We left the tent, packed up our things, and headed to the car. We did not stick around to break camp. We were so shaken by the presence of the bear in the tent with us that we literally did not care what we stepped on, how many roots we twisted, or where we put our feet. All we wanted to do was get away. And I cannot express the level of terror we felt when that bear huffed and puffed and pawed at the tent, and then came that blood-curdling scream. If I could feel that terror today, I would drop to my knees and beg for mercy. Now here's the thing. I have been camping and backpacking in the Sierra Nevada mountains more times than I can count. Black bears are known to frequent the area. Their usual MO is to find a food source, cache their food, and return later to eat. Backpackers cache their food at least 100 feet from camp and at least 5 feet off the ground. We buried our food at least 2 feet deep. I'm almost positive the bear was drawn to our tent by the scent of our dog food that we used to feed our dogs while we were hiking. The bear must have dug the tent up to locate the dog food, but found nothing except for a couple of stale tortillas that we had stuffed inside a stuffed sack. These items were crushed in the bear's claws and were found strewn about the tent and the forest floor. My friend and I decided not to stick around to further investigate. We packed up our things and hiked out of there as fast as we could. To this day, the memory of the bear's sharp claws scrabbling at the tent fabric and the piercing scream still sends shivers down my spine. I got a temp job with Google driving one of those vehicles with a mounted 360 camera system. It was a fun job. I was tasked with recording highways, streets, and sometimes off-beaten paths in the middle of nowhere. I was assigned a company vehicle and I worked as a one-man unit. They paid for gas, hotel, and I got per diem for food. Pay was about $7,000 per month before taxes. 1,099 employee with no benefits though. My car was my office and I would work 5 10-hour days weekly. I wouldn't have any human interaction for days and it was a lonely job, but I enjoyed all the sightseeing adventures. The job was easy, but it required a lot of multitasking. You had a computer inside your car, had to navigate the road, and manipulated the camera system mounted on the roof. This particular day, I was working in Yuba City, California. My route took me to a small town somewhere north of Marysville, Coyitel, CA. It was a quiet town and had a nice countryside vibe to it. It was Friday evening and I was finishing up my shift before my weekend. I had 2 routes to choose from that would connect me to the highway to head north. One was a 20-minute drive on a well-paved 2-lane road, or the other was an alternate route. The alternate route was 14 minutes and consisted of 1-lane roads that turned into a dirt road. I chose the shorter route without thinking much of it. The first part of the route was fine. A beautiful sunset made for great panoramic views. After a few miles, the road became a 1-lane dirt road. The scenery then transitioned from farmland to thick forested areas. As I drove further into the woods, the sun began to set, making for a darker environment. I probably should have turned around when I had the chance, but I told myself that I could handle a little darkness and pressed on ahead. The road was very bumpy. It felt like I was driving off-road. I thought to myself, what the hell am I doing? I needed to turn around, but every time I tried to make the turn, my car would get stuck in the mud. Every time I got stuck, I had to play the rocker and rock my car forward and backward to get traction and free my car from the mud. It was 5 p.m. in the evening in the middle of July, so the sun was still out. Due to the heavy foliage and overgrown trees, the path I drove was really dark and creepy. The forest made for a scene out of a horror movie. I put my headlights on just so I had better vision. As I was making a sharp turn on this downhill slope, I observed my headlights reflecting on a yellow dead end sign. Luckily, there was plenty of room for me to do a U-turn. About 100 yards ahead, this part of the dirt road was the darkest part of the forest, with only small patches of sunlight penetrating through the canopy from the overgrown trees above. Once my car repositioned to exit the area, I looked in my rear view mirror and I noticed someone standing behind the dead-end sign. Luckily, there was plenty of room for me to do a U-turn. This part of the dirt road was the darkest part of the forest, with only small patches of sunlight penetrating through the canopy from the overgrown trees above. Once my car repositioned to exit the area, I looked in my rear view mirror and I noticed someone standing behind the dead-end sign. It looked like a kid, maybe 13 years of age. He had one of those bowl-cut haircuts and wore dark-colored raggedy clothing. His face was pale and he had that 1,000-yard stare. I could feel his gaze locked towards my direction. He had no facial expression, did not blink, and stood frozen in place. At this point, I felt uneasy, but nothing like fear. I knew I had a weapon in my center console. I kept it there for snake encounters and mountain lion sightings, but I don't think it would do much against an angry person. So I continued to back out of the area. Once I saw the brake lights reflect off the yellow dead-end sign, I parked my car. I expected for him to come to my driver's side window, but the kid never came. I looked into my rear view mirror and he was gone. I didn't even hear any footsteps or the sound of twigs snapping. If the kid left, he must have been a trained ninja. The forest was eerily silent. The only sound that stood out was the engine from my car. I drove away slowly and aggressed up the hill. As I came within 100 yards eyesight of the main road, I saw the same looking kid walking about 50 yards in front of me. It's possible it could have been someone else, but the dark colored shirt, ragged jeans, and physical stature resembled the kid from earlier. His back was exposed to me. I couldn't make out his hairstyle or skin complexion from that distance. He walked away from the forest onto the main road and walked eastbound. I waited until he was out of sight before I exited the forest and drove the opposite direction. I was so frightened I didn't even bother to check the rearview mirror. I redlined the hell out of the car and booked it for dear life. As I drove away, I thought to myself, there's no way I'm coming back here to finish the route. I called my supervisor and explained what happened and that I wasn't comfortable driving that route. My supervisor told me to go home and relax for the weekend. He stated he would assign someone else to finish the route. Our cameras worked via LiDAR system and automatically recorded 360 panoramic photographs while the car was in motion. At the time of the encounter, my camera was recording, therefore I suspected the kid was likely captured in one of the images. I reviewed the photos from where I made the U-turn at the dead-end sign. Nothing. No kid, no shadow, not even a silhouette of a person of any form. The only photo captured was the yellow dead-end sign, the overgrown trees in the background, and dust particles from me driving on the dirt road. I reviewed the same recording from the second sighting of the kid upon our exit. Nothing. I had zero evidence of any person being captured in any of my recordings. Don't know if it was due to the lack of sleep, being dehydrated, or my eyes playing tricks with me, but I'm pretty sure I saw a ghost. I didn't tell anyone else about the incident because I didn't think they would believe me. I was done with that assignment and moved on to my next assignment in San Diego. I never saw the kid again. While I was in San Diego, I processed some of the footage I shot from my route in Yuba City. As I was watching the videos, I observed the kid. He was captured in one of the Street View images. I pulled up the location on Google Earth to see exactly where he was captured. It was the exact spot where I saw him standing behind the dead end sign. I wish I got more of the story. Did the kid live in the woods? Was he trying to hitchhike? Or was he a ghost who wanted me to follow him into the woods so he could sacrifice me to his master? I can't help but wonder if the kid was real. Why did he disappear when I parked my car? Was he trying to scare me away? Or was he gauging if I was a threat? Why did he walk out of the woods onto the main road after I passed him? What was his final destination? All these questions will forever be unanswered. Thank you for watching.